Is John Kreese changing for the better, or is it all just an elaborate ploy? That seems to be the big question for his journey in Cobra Kai seasons 5 and 6. Running out of options and allies, it seems that he's backed into a corner. Will he go out guns blazing or ride off into the sunset? This is how Kreese has transformed. Let's talk about his rebirth, his relationship with Silver, his therapy session, and more. Let's recap what we know about Kreese so far. Since this is a continuation of my previous video, Why Kreese Was Misguided, I'm only going to recap the events of his arc in Season 5. Feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter to avoid the recap, but be warned, you may miss some important details later on in the video. After Silver's betrayal following the end of the All Valley tournament, John is sentenced to 2 years in prison due to Terry's manipulation of the district attorney and not being able to afford a lawyer outside of the assigned public defender. To get back at his former friend, he enlists the help of Tori, who remains at Cobra Kai as a spy. With her help, Kreese leaves Daniel a lead on Stingray, which backfires and results in LaRusso getting injured. For the next phase of the plan, John orders Nichols to stay in Cobra Kai and keep an eye on Silver's movements, while he tries to sweet-talk Emily into getting out early. After a failed attempt, he confronts the ghosts of his past in the following session, and deals with Gabriel and the other inmates, who start to both fear and respect Kreese, calling him Sensei. Sometime later, John gets a visit from both Daniel and Johnny, who want to find out what Silver is planning. Kreese agrees to help them out over a promise that he can get out early and a better lawyer, and tells the Miyagi-Fang senseis that Terry plans on entering Cobra Kai into the Sakai Takai. However, this is a ruse by Daniel and Johnny when they show him no mercy, as the two resolve to stop Silver by themselves. Kreese then tells Tori to look after herself, as the latter storms off in frustration and anger. In his last session with his therapist, John expresses regret for everything he's done, especially after being cut off by the best student he ever had, and tries to make things right by stopping an argument between Gabriel and another prisoner. In return, John is stabbed for his efforts and is soon to be dead. However, this was all an elaborate ruse, as Kreese knocks out the guards, takes the coroner's disguise, and uses Emily's keycard to escape from prison, as his breakthrough in therapy was nothing more than a clever ploy. Let's first talk about the rebirth of John Kreese and how that played out in Season 5. As I correctly predicted in my last video, two key points of his arc are how Tori tries to help him take back Cobra Kai from Silver and coming face to face with his actions that landed him in jail. How early during this time in prison the Queen Cobra started helping her sensei is unknown, but it seems to have at least been as early as the start of the events of Season 5. In Ouroboros, having learned that Terry rigged the All Valley most likely from Tori, it's implied that Kreese pushed her to confront Silver about this, only for him to keep expanding. While he later claims for it to be unintentional, John states that LaRusso getting hurt was a means to an end, and tells Tori that they're the only ones who can trust each other. Kreese understands what it's like to be behind enemy lines, alluding to the flashbacks we saw in Season 3, and explains that he's going to play the good soldier so he can get out early, and for her to keep her eyes and ears on Terry. This plan seems to work at first, as he notices the guard watching Gabriel harass him, and John plays pacifist, though giving an inauthentic performance to Emily, his therapist, even making a joke about his Season 3 fight with Daniel LaRusso. Upset at this plan not working and confronting Emily about it, Kreese takes her suggestion and confronts his past head on in one of my favorite scenes ever that involves Martin Cove. I'd like to think that each person John sees in his session represents something. He first visualizes Betsy and talks about how the death of the love of his life deeply affected him while he was away during the Vietnam War. It's no mistake that Betsy represents loss. When Emily talks about bringing his attitude from the war home, we then see Captain Turner, as Kreese remembers having to fight him to the death and learning how to weaponize his anger. Turner represents hatred, as he was the one who molded John into who he is today and taught him the lesson of no mercy, both through verbal and physical means. It was this man who planted the seed of this ideology that Kreese would pass on to his students. Silver is shown sitting in the chair next, where he asks John who he's angry at and also states that he did this to himself. Terry could represent anger, as Kreese deflects the blame of specifically being put into this cage or cell and blames Silver, saying he did nothing wrong. However, Silver could also represent betrayal, as he's wearing the same exact suit he wore that night, and although he betrayed John, in Silver's mind Kreese betrayed him because of Johnny as well, while also constantly bringing up the debt that he owed. Tori appears and asks if he feels any regret, which the former sensei is confused about. Nichols, I think, represents unintentional hurt, as John, and in ways Daniel and Johnny have done as well, use students like Tori to fight his battles in the karate war. He's also furthering this by pressuring her to stay in the dojo to the point where she submitted to harsh training and punishment. The best student in Cobra Kai, Johnny Lawrence, then appears and asks Kreese about the people he's hurt, following up to Tori's previous question, and that he wanted the students all to be like him. It's worth pointing out that the version of Johnny that appears at first is from right after the 84 All Valley, where Kreese choked him. Lawrence then appears in his current age, smiling a bit when his former sensei said that he wanted them to be better than he was. I believe this is supposed to represent regret or guilt, as this was the student he ended up hurting the most, and that is why he changed his mind on what Tori should do at the All Valley. Finally, we see the young version of John Kreese appear right before he goes to basic training, when Emily tells him the better version of him is locked down somewhere deep. This version of John is supposed to represent rebirth or redemption, as this is the person he needs to be and also used to be. It's also this Kreese we see mostly fighting and making the prisoners respect and fear him as he defends himself. In Bad Eggs, we see more of the softer side of Kreese that we saw in Season 4. Although he refuses to talk to Daniel and taunts him for getting hurt, his motivation to tell the two what he knows is motivated by Johnny, as he does feel some regret for how things went down at the old dojo, for almost putting Tori what he put Johnny through, and to make amends for his mistakes. Kreese constantly looks over at Johnny before agreeing to help and telling Silver's plan, as he wants to try to make amends for what he did. There's even somewhat of a father and son-like moment when John offers Jello, and John has a look of surprise when he realizes Lawrence is still angry with him. Although it may seem to be a manipulation tactic, as I talked about in my Why Terry Silver is Still Terrifying video, Kreese seems to be telling the truth of wanting to focus on his students and Johnny, as it's possible that Terry was jealous of Johnny. When duped by Johnny and Daniel, this is what motivates the former sensei to realize that he's put Tori through enough and she needs to focus on herself instead of trying to get him out. Or Kreese doesn't want Tori to get into any more trouble for assisting him in escaping prison, but is saddened that neither Tori nor Johnny wants to talk to him. This is at least what seems to be the case when he breaks down in tears in his last session with Emily, as the only other time he came close to shedding tears is when he talked to Johnny at the homeless shelter in Season 2. However, it all turns out to be a ploy, as while there was a transformation, it was a more ruthless one. This elaborate plot of breaking down and being vulnerable was so that he could escape from prison. Gabriel's smile after the stabbing also gives this away. In Season 6, we'll see an even more ruthless version of John Kreese. Now that he has been betrayed by not only Silver but Daniel and Johnny, he's going to make sure his legacy isn't erased. Let's also talk about Kreese's relationship with Silver. I touched on this in my first videos on Kreese and Silver, but I think it's worth pointing out some details here. Given how John was able to manipulate Terry not only into becoming a sensei again, but also into his repressed mindset in the episode Minefields, it's clear this is where Silver learned it from. I also think that while there have been some genuine reasons why Kreese wanted Silver to do what they originally set out to do, the rivalry between Daniel and Johnny, as predicted by Silver, did get mixed in. With the different clashing of teaching methods and jealousy brewing between the two, it was only a matter of time before, ironically, the friendship would fall apart as it did with Daniel and Johnny. There may have been a sense of entitlement because of having saved his friend's life that John feels like he is owed not only Cobra Kai, but the way to teach it, which is why they start to clash. Because of not wanting Lawrence to be hurt, this causes even more confusion with Silver, who decides to usurp Kreese after turning to substance once again. Since there's no interaction between the two in Season 5 outside of the therapy session, which again this is not a direct one, it's clear that Kreese is only after one thing at this point: revenge. John was right about one thing: Silver did slip up as he kept the footage of Tori confronting him about the All Valley, and this is what Miyagi Fang needed to expose Terry. I'm hoping we'll see at least a fight of some sort between the two in Season 6, as I don't think Silver would be written off that easily. Although Kreese knows he can't match his resources, I think the fact that he would be able to match Silver physically is something he's confident in. In the flashback where the two are training under Kim Sung-young, from what we saw, Kreese had the upper hand at one point, but it also seemed that the two were evenly matched. This would make it all the more interesting for these two to fight. Here's a big question about Kreese's arc in Season 5. Was his breakthrough genuine? While it was ultimately used as a ploy to escape prison, I'd like to think so. Remember that in Season 4, before his arrest, he had sympathy for both Tori and Johnny. With Johnny, Kreese intervened from Silver injuring him any further, and tried to apologize for the assault that he had no idea was planned by Terry. It's also John realizing that he made his mistakes with Lawrence in Tori's match with Sam, which is why he tells her to fight her way to avoid repeating history. With Nichols, his statement of "I put you through enough" says it all, as again, I think he doesn't want to put her in any trouble if she knew about his escape from prison. As I mentioned before, I think Kreese still feels regret not only over his actions with Johnny leading up to this point, but also wants to make amends, which is why he looks at Johnny constantly when he and LaRusso visit him in prison. Hearing that his protege wants to erase everything he did is what concerns him, and is what he confides in Emily near the end of the season. I think the tears and act were still real because while it was a ploy, We can assume that John would also use this opportunity to get out and try to make amends. After all, knowing his mindset, Kreese would assume that it was Daniel's idea to keep him in prison, especially because of his rivalry with Miyagi-Do. Given his actions in Season 2 through Season 4, it's unlikely that we'll ever see a reconciliation between the two Johnnies. Here are my final thoughts on Kreese and what we could expect to see from him in the future. Given what we know so far with the Cobra Kai Season 6 teaser, it's confirmed, as I speculated in my What Will Happen in Cobra Kai Season 6 video, that John has still one ally left, Kim Da-eun. Now that Cobra Kai has secured entry into the Sekai Takai, the two Ks will do what they can to restore the legacy and help the teachings of Master Kim Sun-young live on. I still want to see at least a proper fight between Silver and Kreese, as again, I doubt Terry would be written off the show that easily. Kreese's transformation, positive or negative, is only just beginning, and I think we'll see more of it when the time comes. Speaking of transformations, Johnny Lawrence is transforming into a better father. He breaks the cycle of having bad father figures like Kreese by finally owning up to his mistakes with Robbie and Miguel, and is doing the best he can to be there for Carmen and the new baby.